This morning is not a traditional service in that this is not a sermon. So these are just a few thoughts on this day, which, as Marian made reference to, is both a day that honors Saint Francis of Assisi and is World Communion Sunday. And as someone who really loves liturgy, I thought, weird. How do they intersect? But of course they do. Of course they do. We recognize the sainthood of Francis of Assisi. Francis, who loved the Lord and recognized the mighty power of the Creator, who brought all things into being with a word that Dina read to us. All things into being with a word. That includes all of us as people joining around the globe in communion together. And it also includes all the creatures, all the plants and animals and planets that are here. So that when we talk about all, we mean all. This past week, Richard Rohr, who is himself a Franciscan monk, spoke about that love of God. How difficult it was for Francis, who was a very wealthy young man, to give up not only his wealth, but to sort of throw it back in the face of his very prosperous family so that he could give a life of service to God. He did not retreat into a monastic way of life, but he chose to work within culture and society. He chose to live with the poor on the streets and to beg for his food. He sought to love all humanity humbly, as Jesus did, working to bring dignity to all people and animals. All creation was sacred, and he lived that out. The full spectrum of Francis's life, from joyful exaltation of the Lord to crushing self-doubt, reflected his living commitment to Christ's teaching of love. And Richard Rohr wrote, "The way of love can be harrowing. It is not a path of convenience. It requires vigilance and discipline to speak for the voiceless, and courage to accept the consequences of ringing the bells that break the spell of complacency. Yet the fruits of such action are sweet. They are wild fruits, and they yield in abundance, enough to feed a whole kingdom right here on earth." So it is today, in our celebration of the one who has gathered us all together, humans and animals, waters and mountains, the stars named above us. We will come to the table today with people all around the world to be fed, to be fed in the sacrament of communion with the most basic of elements, grain and grape, the first fruits of creation. We are nourished in love together with all of God's family. God nourishes us so that when we leave this place and interact with animals and neighbors, we carry God's love to preach the good news, not with words, but with the daily actions of our lives. In Ephesians, Paul writes, "He destined us for adoption as children through Jesus Christ, according to the good pleasure of his will, to the praise of his glorious grace that he freely bestowed on us in his beloved. In Christ we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the riches of his grace that he lavished on us all." May we share those riches with all whom we encounter, for all of God's creation is good.